Every country has its own customs and rules. Sometimes they are not dictated by the state at all. Today we will tell you what comes out of this. The most dangerous and terrible areas in the world that will never appear in tourist brochures. Huge neighborhoods and even entire cities where it's better not to go, criminal ghettos, drug dens, and bankrupt cities where chaos thrives and the law is written by the streets. Might makes right? Bulgaria, Romania, Mexico, Brazil, Honduras, South Africa, and others. Dangerous rankings have diverse geography. Let's start with the bastion of democracy. It has been called a ghost town for many years. Once flourishing, thanks to the automotive industry of the mid-20th century, Detroit is steadily declining. Businesses and state enterprises are closing. People are leaving en masse. The population has decreased by more than 2/3. The city has been officially bankrupt for 11 years. It owes the authorities about $20 billion.
Detroit often appears in crime reports. Shootings in broad daylight are common here. Robberies, pickpocketing, car thefts, and armed assaults thrive. Many areas are considered particularly dangerous and are controlled by gangs. The city has many weed-covered streets and thousands of abandoned houses.
Another point of social catastrophe in the USA is the Philadelphia area. The city is called the drug capital of America. Here's Kensington, not at all the outskirts of the city, only 15 to 20 minutes to the center. Horrific scenes like from a horror movie. They are called zombies and Walking Dead. Unconscious, hunched over in a stupor after another dose, hordes of drug addicts have flooded the sidewalks and streets of the richest country.
Orange little things on the ground and white packages are the packaging and caps from used syringes.
Many drug addicts reuse syringes here, even though they are distributed for free by a volunteer organization. Dirt, garbage, syringes, an open-air drug den, sheer and sinister chaos.
A kit can be bought for $3. For just $3, you can buy something heavy. For example, methamphetamine, basically anything you like.
The harsh truth of American life. The shocking scale of societal decay. No one hides their deadly habit here. They sell and shoot up openly. But social services, instead of preventive measures, focus on safe use. That is, they distribute clean needles to drug addicts, and with a reserve, the results are dubious.
Every day we are given such an emergency kit. 10 packages, syringes, clean water, a tourniquet. In short, everything you need to take a drug. They get all this because it's profitable. You step aside, sell 2 needles for $1. And there you go, you already have money for a dose.
Tents are even set up in the middle of American streets, where men and women calmly take drugs. The two most popular illicit substances are fentanyl, a cheap heroin substitute, and xylazine, a drug intended for horse anesthesia.
The Kensington area is a heroin ghetto. Hundreds of drug addicts lie on the streets, dealers sell doses without shame. And if you dare to come here by metro, a heroin guide will approach you right at the station exit. A special person who will help you buy a dose and comfortably get high. Drug addicts shoot up in broad daylight, hunched over in a stupor or unconscious on the street. Many have fresh gaping wounds that desperately need medical attention. Needles, syringes, and trash are scattered on the sidewalks.
In the USA, a person dies from a drug overdose every 7 minutes. Annually, over 100,000 lives are lost due to deadly poison, more than from shootings and car accidents combined.
Dilapidated entrances, garbage on the streets, and many, many beggars. This is Paris, which you won't see in glossy travel magazines. Whites fled from here long ago. They say about Barbès, one of the most dangerous areas of Paris. The 18th arrondissement of the City of Love is far from romantic and humane. Near the metro, there are stolen goods vendors and beggars. The first refugees from North Africa appeared here back in the 90s. It's not quite the favelas, but you can still get into serious trouble here. Here's what the locals say.
No one cares about you here, and locals often fight each other over some nonsense. At such moments, it's especially scary because they can take out their aggression on you and you are completely helpless. This area is like a powder keg. Any spark can cause an outburst of hatred.
Mostly unemployed people from Algeria, Tunisia, Morocco, and other countries live here. Immigrants form communes based on ethnicity and often fight among themselves over territory.
Many live on the streets or in underground passages. An abundance of poverty, drugs, and, of course, crime. The dirty side of freedom, beauty, and love. It's not just tourists who shouldn't come here. Parisians themselves try not to know or notice this part of the city. In the French capital.
There are many street vagrants without documents here. There are also families living in cars or makeshift shelters on the sidewalks. In the northern part of the Barbès quarter, near the Boulevard Périphérique, the Parisian equivalent of the Moscow Ring Road, there is even an entire street of cars and vans filled with clothes, blankets, and dishes. Next to them are small plastic tables for snacks, with trash scattered around. While the men roam the area, the women sit inside with the children and don't even look outside.
Due to the influx of migrants, local authorities recommend tourists, quote, avoid places located near metro stations. Take, for example, Porte de la Chapelle. Locals call it Calin du Crec, corner for a high.
In Europe, unfortunately, the number of tourists addicted to drugs is growing, especially among the youth, and this phenomenon can also be characterized by the fact that young people do not see a future. The fact that young people are falling into drugs is somewhat reminiscent of the 90s. Yes, we had a very difficult period in our countries in the 90s, and the drug phenomenon was very present there too, and thank God, our countries overcame this tragedy. Because the youth absolutely did not see a future. Absolutely. And this same phenomenon related to drugs is happening here. Why? Because young people need to escape from what they see happening on their streets, which doesn't make them happy. This area is also a top spot for illegals. Thousands of migrants live under the bridges. Another metro station where it's dangerous to be is Stalingrad. By the way, it had the largest refugee camp in all of Paris.
Stalingrad has faced problems related to homelessness and drug use in public places, which have marred its bustling streets. At the entrance or exit of the station, you often see many people living in tents or sleeping bags under the station bridge. This also leads to crimes, thefts, fraud, and robberies.
Overall, Paris is a record holder for areas not for everyone. Arab quarters, North Station, East Station, the 11th and 20th arrondissements. All these are places where outsiders have no business. Paris and Brussels are practically twin cities in terms of safety. The Belgian capital also has many corners where it's better not to go, especially at night.
The residential quarter of Peterbos in the Anderlecht district has been taken over by local gangs. Even special police raids don't help improve the situation. Over the past 3 years, more than 100 of them have been conducted. However, in 2023, the situation worsened even more. The gangs turned Peterbos into a hub for selling cannabis and cocaine, which they get from Marseille.
A telling example is the G4S company, which installs fire alarms and hired additional security for its workers. Otherwise, no one wanted to go to Peterbos. It cost the company €70,000 a month.
The critical situation was also reported by the local Brussels Police Department. The head of the local unit, Jurgen de Landshire, noted that for law enforcement, Peterbos is a place we don't go.
Another Brussels commune, Molenbeek, is also advised to be avoided, especially at night. The most dangerous and infamous district of Arab immigrants in Brussels, connections to terrorism and high crime rates. It is also called the incubator of European jihadism.
It looks like an ordinary district, but most European terrorist attacks trace back here. People from Molenbeek bomb Madrid, Paris, Brussels. As in neighboring France, dangerous urban tumors appeared in areas where migrants from different countries came in search of a better life.
These people, who even become Belgian citizens, first, do not speak the local language, second, do not know the local culture, and live in areas where they are completely isolated from the local society, receiving information through the television of the countries they came from. So there is no integration, there is this, I would say, quarterization. So Chinese quarters appear, Arab quarters appear, and now even Arab cities, where the local population is completely displaced. Caracas is the most dangerous city on earth. That's what travel bloggers and various journalists like to write about, the capital of Venezuela. But they always highlight a special part of it. Barrios are slums.
Since 2000, more than 250,000 violent deaths have occurred in these places. This situation has turned all of us into forensic experts. We understand various types of attacks and kidnappings. Living there without fear is impossible.
Venezuelans themselves note that life in barrios is no more valuable than a mobile phone or wallet. The sad statistic of unsolved murders is 92 out of 100. Local slums are teeming with drug dealers, gangsters, and pimps.
One of the most popular types of crime is express kidnapping. While you are stopped at a red light, a car pulls up and you are forcibly dragged into a van. Then demands are made to your relatives and friends to pay a ransom.
To become such a victim, you just need to look decent. It's that simple. Moreover, the ransom amount can reach up to $100,000. About 70% of Caracas's population lives in such slums.
Prosperous areas sometimes border barrios without any transitions. For example, one of the wealthiest districts of Caracas, country club with golf courses, lives side by side with Barrio Chapelin. Often, mini barrios arise next to wealthy neighborhoods where the servants live. They are generally safe, but there are also huge barrio cities. In the largest barrio of Caracas, Petare, about 1 million people live. It's a whole shadow city with its own economy.
Does the police have control over the residents of barrios? It's a rhetorical question, because there are enough of their own armies inside such areas, armed to the teeth. In general, barrios are the twin brothers of the infamous Brazilian favelas and the massive slums of Kibera in Kenya, where many still live without electricity, water supply, and sewage. Kowloon is perhaps the most famous example of a troubled area in the world. Being a fortress city in the 19th century, in the 20th century, it became synonymous with the word unsafe. In the mid-20th century, it was controlled by triads, and the government had no access to the wild fortress.
In the mid-20th century, Kowloon gained the status of the most densely populated city in the world. At that time, there were 2 million people per square kilometer. It seems this record has not yet been broken. For comparison, the population density in Moscow is less than 5,000, and in Hong Kong itself, about 6,800 people per square kilometer.
Until the early 90s, Kowloon was called the endless floors reaching the sky and tiny balconies. This seems to be the true concrete jungle.
The population density also breaks world records. At the same time, the apartments themselves do not exceed 10 square meters. However, this does not scare even newcomers. Hong Kong is one of the most expensive cities in the world. Yet, renting an apartment in this monster by local standards costs pennies, $1,500 a month.
They even managed to fit a mosque and a Buddhist temple inside the building. Filmmakers love this building, and it's also called the Instagram house. And the triads, of course. Finding anyone in these cage-like apartments is an extremely difficult task for the police, and they take advantage of this. The King's Cross in Australia has been a place where local mafiosi lived since the early 20th century. The peak of the area was in the 60s, when a literal gang war erupted on the streets.
The authorities could do nothing with the raging area, and after World War II, they introduced a new law, the 6 o'clock rule. This meant that, after 6 in the evening, all bars and pubs in the area were closed. They wanted to reduce the number of murders and violence. The law was repealed at the end of the 20th century, but soon reinstated.
The alcohol ban was reinstated in 2014 after the deaths of 2 people in a drunken fight, Thomas Kelly and Daniel Christie. It remained in effect in some parts of Sydney until 2020. However, they are in no hurry to lift it in King's Cross.
However, the area is known not only as the drunkest district in the world. In the early 2000s, a heroin crisis erupted there. At that time, police officers officially stated, "We are powerless." The trigger for the epidemic was the first controlled injection room. That is, the authorities tried to regulate who and what would be injected. As you can understand, the idea was a failure.
A few years later, Sydney authorities declared the crisis over, and King's Cross was now a drug-free zone. In 2015, over 100 police officers organized a raid on local clubs. Drugs were once again being taken out in bags. Local journalists call the area the bloodstream of Australia's drug market.
Sydney, the same city, is a very expensive place to live, and not every immigrant can find a place there, a place under the sun. Because the city, I repeat, is expensive, real estate is very costly, both for rent and even more so for purchase. And so people start going into the gray and then into the black zone, engaging in drug trafficking and dealing. Southeast Asia is not far from here, from where a very serious traffic comes. And so the state tries to neutralize these stories, thereby lowering the bar of stability and accordingly the security in terms of healthcare for its citizens.
Why does this happen? Certainly not because there are only bad people in these cities. Sociologists cite poverty and high unemployment as the main reason. When you are hungry and have to survive, moral principles are not a priority. In desperation, people are capable of the most terrible crimes. Sometimes the government simply does not notice dangerous sores, and sometimes it cannot cope with the overwhelming corruption and crime.
From Ireland to Sydney, yes, to Australia, to the United States, there are huge problems. These problems need to be solved. After all, there are people who are residents and were born in these territories or came there for family reunification. And there are people who came there as migrants. These countries treat migrants very harshly. And in fact, they break their lives in the first months of their stay in these countries, forcing people to go into the gray and black zones, breaking the law, engaging in very dark deeds, robbing, spreading drugs, both light and hard. They cannot find a job because to get even minimal education to work, you need money again.
In Belarus, in the turbulent 90s, there were also areas where you wouldn't go out at night, and entire highways where they would simply rob you day and night. But the state dealt with banditry. Order has been restored in the country, and today, from the selection presented in the program, it is hard to imagine anything similar here. Another reason to appreciate what we have and to cherish order and peace in our hometowns. Goodbye.